Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. So I'm just going to start off by mixing the same basic colours as I had before. Now this means I can, because I just did 2 colours per object, I don't have much work to do. It's quite nice and simple. And it's yeah, it's a small leap to get these colours in. So let's start off with some of that creamy background colour. There you are. So there's a bit of yellow ochre in there. Probably a bit of blue and red as well. Let's just pop that there. That'll work. So that's a bit bluer and a bit redder. Yeah, a bit more purple in there, just to push it down. Remember the complementary colours thing? So I've got purple and I've got this. I used some yellow ochre there, but you can mix yellow ochre, you know, using your 3 primaries. So that's a basic, colour, pretty close. Not a big difference there. I quite like that. And I've got a shadow colour as well. So here, I'm going to be doing a few extra bits here, which is, you'll absorb whatever you're ready for, I guess. But I sometimes like to mix the light colour and the dark colour. So not the actual colours of objects, but the colour of the light. The light is something that's uniform across the whole thing. It's the same light hitting that tankard as is hitting this tea towel, as is hitting this apple. So if I mix the light colour, and for me it's a kind of slightly there's some yellow for luminosity. That's probably too much. Or is it? No, that's okay. And I'll put a bit of that orange in it just to warm it up a bit. Makes it a little bit creamy. Is that too much? Let's see if I can get away with it. Maybe dial it back to the yellow a little bit more. Sometimes there's a bluish light, especially in the evening. Sometimes there's a pinkish light, especially in the morning. So you can mix this colour as a colour that you can add in. No, I got clumsy with the mixing then. I didn't use the top of I used the top of the knife stupidly. And look, there's this whole lump of paint which isn't mixed. That's why we try and keep it to the bottom of the knife if we can. Shadow colour. Well, I'll start with a complementary. I'll start with the opposite of this. So this is a slightly creamy yellow. So I'll go with a sort of a bluey purple. So I've still got some red there. So let's do that. And this is going to be too bright. Let's lean it towards the blue a bit. Okay. And I need to put some more blue out. So I'm going to be thinking I was prepared. Well, I am prepared because it's right over my shoulder. There we go. Yes, so don't skimp on the paint, but that's something you'll figure out. There you are. So that's my bluey purple. So that's a nice shadow colour I can add in. I can even stick a little bit of this orange in it just to soften it down, neutralise it a little bit. It's gone a bit green, stick some red in it. And then that's gone a bit brown, so I'll put a bit more blue in it. There you are. So that's a nice sort of warm shadow colour. I quite like that. So I'll put that over here. And again, I won't be using that directly. I'll just be adding it into other mixes. So if I do some more of this background colour as well, I won't need as much of this. So that was some yellow ochre in there. And if I put a lump of purple in that, I'll start to get a shadow colour. And that'll do for starters. The tones I've put down at the beginning will give me a fairly good indication of if I'm in the ballpark. So this will give me feedback as to the colours I'm mixing. And so what else do I need? I'm going to need a slightly greeny colour for that tankard. So I'll start with some blue. If but I'll just use up this blue. And I'll put some yellow in it to get it greenish, and I'll put some red in it to neutralise that, darken it down a bit. That's too purple now, so a bit more blue and yellow. So you can find your way to these colours just by steering them around. There, that's pretty close. Yeah, that's pretty close to the colour I want for my tankard. Does it fit in with this? Yes, that's pretty much the same. Okay, and then there's a lighter version of that, which is probably a little bit greener. So I'll just use a bit of that light colour, add it in. Let's see if that works. That, I feel like that's going to be too light now. Yes, it is. But actually, no, maybe not. There. So I'm discovering things as I go along. I'm not knowing exactly what colour I need to mix right at the beginning. So there's two colours for my tankard, and I'll need two colours for my apple and two colours for my bread. And then I've got everything I need on the palette ready. So I'm not doing one thing and then stopping and then going, oh, now I've got to mix some colours for another object. I'm doing them all together. So that red, well, let's use this one here. Let's make it a bit more orange. Let's put some blue in it, which is going to make it purple. This is my shadow colour, and then I'm going to use some of this purple just to give it an extra shadowiness. I think that's still too red. That's my camera going to sleep. Hang on. Wakey wakey. Okay, what it'll do for starters, and the red side, it's a lot brighter. So I'm just going to clean off that knife. Let's take some of this pink here, let's mix it in with that orange. Let's put some more yellow in it. That's too light, or way too light. I'm going to put that away to one side. Let's go back to that brighter red. Actually, I'll borrow a little bit of that. That's a bit more like it. And this is quite close to what's there. It's actually a stronger version of the colour. See how dull this one is. So yeah, let's take a little bit of that light colour there, mix that in, see how well that works. Looks a bit more purple now. Yeah, and there is a stronger colour in there, just in between. So, yeah, so I'm starting off with those two colours. So from there, I can already see a new colour I'm going to mix. So if I look at my apple, I've got this light bit on one side, which is kind of this dusky purpley colour. I've got this shadow bit on that side, which is this darker purpley colour. The in between is the reddest bit of the apple. That's where I want to turn the red up, and it has to relate to these two colours. Now I have them there on the palette, so I can mix a red, and I can say I'm going to use a bit of that and a bit of that, and mix them together and say, no, even redder than that, I think. And a tiny bit of blue. Now that's pretty close. It's the right amount darker, it's not as dark as this, but you see that journey between those three colours? And that's the little journey I can see on my apple. So I've jumped ahead there, mixed this third colour. Last thing I'll do is, let's do the bread colours. So I'll keep them over here. I'm kind of running out of room now. There you are. So I've got that nice orange. And I'll do a light version of it, which I'll use that light colour. That's too light. This is getting away from me. Sometimes the colour gets away from you and you just have to sort of scrap it and start over. So who's mixing along here?
What would you do, James, if you had a white vase? Because pure white doesn't seem quite Right.
No, precisely. So do you see the colour I mixed for my tea towel?
Yeah.
Now you look at the tea towel here and it looks pretty bright, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But what I've done is I've mixed a fairly neutral colour based on, I look at this with my eye and I see something that's a bit warmer.
Yeah.
It's not like a bluish white, it's a warmer white. So I've mixed a warm grey here. Now if I put a piece of white next to it, look at that distance.
Yeah.
So I can lighten this plenty. Once I've got some paint on, I can lighten that as much as I want.
Okay.
So start with the neutrals, start with the mid-tones and the neutral colours. Now because it's a white vase, it's already a neutral colour, it doesn't lean towards any of the primary colours particularly, but it might have one more than another. And the point I'm going to get to is, you know what, I'm going to borrow a little bit of that red to make the darker colour for my, my crusts of bread. Put a bit more red in it, a bit of that purple for where it's in shadow, and I've got my darker version. The lighter version, again, a little bit more red. Is that too much? I've gone too far with it again. Let's put some of that light in it. Like I say, I think I might have lost this colour somewhere. Put some yellow in it to steer it around, but then it might all be too bright. No, that's not right at all. I'm going to scrape that up and chuck it. Gone. But there you are. Out of all the colours I needed to mix, I think I've done pretty well so far. Let's start that again. I'll start with some yellow this time. I'll borrow some of that red, add a small amount of that. It's too purple. Add increase, tiny amounts of red. Oh, that red's so strong, this is the problem. So sometimes I'll mix a weaker version and use that as a tinting colour. So let's start again. Let's get some yellow on it. Let's get some of that light colour in it. And now I've got this weaker red I mixed, and I can add in bits of that. Okay, that's a bit more like it. And that's pretty good. Maybe a little bit more. There you are. So if I put that on there, it's a slightly lighter version, but it's pretty much the same colour, it's pretty much the same hue. Okay, now each of these colours has the opportunity to have little satellites of variations that go around it. So this is just 3 objects in the background. So I've got tankard, bread, apple, and that's my background colours. And there they are. Now if I see a bit of the tea towel that looks a bit bluer, well, I can take a bit of this, I can make a little satellite colour, and I can borrow a little bit of blue. Maybe I'll borrow some off the tankard. Mix those together, and I've got a colour that sort of sits halfway in between. So there might be a place for that, but actually what I'm going to do is I'll mix it as I need it. So can everyone see what I did in terms of preparing my palette here? Notice my core colours are around the outside, the mixed colours are in the space in the middle, and there's a bit of space around them for me to mix new colours. Okay, and now I can start to put the paint on. Like I said, I'm going to do this very quickly, so you can take your time with all of this. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to rush through it or anything. And I'm going to think back to how I started the picture. So I had my triangle, I can remember my triangle sort of thing. Actually that shadow there, that was quite important. The top of the apple was quite important, and this dark shape there was quite important. I've changed the composition a little bit, so there's what would it be? So there's more tea towel behind, but that's okay. That's perfectly fine.
When you say something's quite important, those areas you picked out,
Yeah.
what do you mean by that?
I mean, I've chosen them as important.
Right.
So I could easily have chosen different things as being important.
Right.
And I could yet change my mind as I go along. But
Yeah.
the main purpose of that is that I'm not saying everything's equally important, because
Right.
that makes too much work. And also you can end up doing that thing where you just kind of start colouring in, going from one
Yeah.
side to the other, paying the same amount of attention to each detail. Whereas in fact, at this point, I want to be aware of how I want my viewer to look around.
I see.
And so those soft edges, not all of them are going to get hardened up, but they are around here, they are around
Yeah.
here, and they are around here. That's where the hard edges are going to turn up. And other bits, less important.
Gotcha.
Okay, so what shall I start with? I'll start with my tankard, and I'll have more than one brush on the go here. And I'll start with my lighter colour, I think. Yeah, it doesn't matter because there'll still be a slightly brighter version of this. Okay, that already doesn't feel quite right. That needs to be greener. I'm going to borrow a bit of that yellow and make a little satellite colour, just a brush mix, and just yellow it as much as it needs to be yellowed, and start to paste that in. And that's pretty close to what I want. And it's just a shape. It's just a big shape within that tankard area. That's a big shape within the tankard. I can then go across to my dark one and just use the same brush because I've used up the paint on the brush. So if there was excess paint on it, I could just wipe it off with a rag. I wouldn't have to wash the brush every time. Okay, and I could put some of these dark shapes in. Again, I think that's sort of, there's other subtle colours I can see here. There's a dark shape there, and it's too blue, which is what my grandmother used to say about Bob Monkhouse. Okay, so I'm gonna make all of that a bit greener. And if that green is too strong, which I think it probably will be, it's got a bit darker now. I'll borrow a little bit of the light colour. And so I can start to find my way in to these colours. So there, yeah, that's some greener bits. It's too green now, so I'm going to take a little bit of red and pop that in. I could easily just borrow a bit of the red from the apple. So in that sense, all the bits of the image are all working together. And I'm just putting in some big shapes. I'm not worrying about hard edges or anything like that yet. Yeah. There's a red bit, so it's a bit more purpley around here. This rough edge over here, that's not the shape I'm going to be doing. So I could get on my other brush, I could get a bit of that light colour. I could cut out part of that shape. See that? Just change my mind about where those edges are, find my way into them gradually. And then I'll go back to my lighter one. And there's that sort of shape there. And yeah, a bit more of that over here. And a bit, let me see. Oh yeah, I can see a little bit of the light from behind the handle. So now I've got an idea of how wide that is. I can put a bit of that light in. I'll put a bit of that dark in now, start to describe the handle. Okay, go back into that dark. I'm going to use a bit of that purple here, make another satellite off the dark one. So already I've got a slightly lighter, redder version of this greeny grey. Now I've got a darker, more purpley version. So there's going to be a bit of that there. There's going to be some of it here. There's going to be a bit there. Okay, that's changing its shape, that's good. There'll be a bit down here. And that will kind of scoop up, and that's giving me some of the shape of my tankard. Quite pleased with that. There's a sort of a dark edge underneath there. I'll refine that later on. Yeah, put a few darks in here. There's a few mil there, that carries across. So yeah, get the excess off the brush, and I need a lighter version of the light one, which is a bit greeny. So I'm going to get an extra bit of that light there. I'm going to pop that in here, say yes, that travels across there. There's a bit in there, there's a bit there, and there's a bit for the handle as well, which kind of comes down there. So I'm trying to avoid, I don't want to get too caught up in details too soon. That needs to be greener. Go back across to my greener one. Yeah, a few vertical marks, keep it simple. Yeah, and so that's already starting to describe that tankard. I've got this background colour. I can put in that hard edge where I want to see it here and there and there. Notice I haven't done a continuous ellipse, I've just done it in sections, and here, and there's that white space, so that's moving the bread around a bit. So the objects are in slightly different places. I can trust the existing drawing. But yeah, do you see a tankard start to arrive there?
Yeah.
Now there's still loads more I can do in terms of, so let's move that light across. The shadows are in a different place today, so I think I'll change them. Okay, great. I've got that negative space there, that sort of cuts in. Yeah, I've got that little highlight bit on the background. Yeah, so that's a tankard pretty much turned up already. I'll save the bright highlights and lowlights until later. They'll turn up when I need them to. I could just define that edge there. That seems like an important bit. The rest of it, still really fuzzy over here, doesn't matter. You know, could pop in a little bit. There isn't a continuous line or anything. So what else? While I've got some of that background colour, this bit's lighter, but that doesn't look much different to what I've already painted. That's going to be the edge of my bread, which kind of cuts in here. Okay, some shadow colour. That light comes across here. Okay, and let's start to describe the edge of that apple. That'd be fine. So that's all. I'm already okay with that particular edge. This side, it's not right at all. But I don't need to worry about that yet. There, getting myself covered in paint. So I'm going to get another brush or two on the go. So I've got those three colours for the apple. I can just chuck. Hello, yes?
What size brush were you using for the...
These are 6s.
Yeah.
This is an 8. So I'm just going to do this apple with an 8.
Okay.
Okay. So that's the, and I'm just using this paint neat at the moment because it comes out a fairly decent consistency. If your paint's a bit gummy or thick, or if it's too fluid, do say. Now I'm just looking again, big shapes, so there's a big shape there for that deep shadow, and it's that shape. There's bits of the background showing through, I'm okay with that. But actually no, this paint is a little bit gummy. I'm going to just touch my brush into the oil there, just the tip of it. I'm going to mix that up, and that's going to make the paint flow a little bit more. So we can add a little bit of oil to make the paint flow. There you are, that's better, that's better behaved. That shadow comes across underneath. Again, I'm not respecting the edges I've already done, I'm making new ones where I need to. And that, yeah, that defines the new edge of the apple.
So
Okay.
this is the first layer that you use oil to
Yes,
thin the paint.
yes,
Previous to this, it's been white
Yeah.
spirits
Yes.
and making it dull. So does the oil keep this layer the glossy?
yes. The fact is that the ground we've already put on means that
Yeah.
the oil stays in this layer of paint.
Right.
Now there's other things you can do. You can size a canvas beforehand, so something like this canvas here, I happen to have lying around. I've gone with a colour, because sometimes I like to use a colour as a ground, but it's also primed with a sized primer, so this surface doesn't absorb oil.
Right.
So for an alla prima painting where I'm just painting it in one go, nothing gets a chance to dry, I'd use this. But it does limit how much you can do with the drawing, and how much you can sort of get that insurance of that first layer on. So to begin with, we're working in an easier way with that layer of of insurance. So okay, so that was my dark. I'm going to look for the light shapes now, and say I can see them there, and there is a bit more colour. I quite like that. That works into that shape. There's a bit of it over here. Maybe it sort of levels out a bit at the top. Great. That comes down here and meets that shadow there. Okay, and then we've got this stronger red right in the middle, which goes here. Is that too dark? No, I think that's okay. Okay, so I didn't need to add any oil to that. And it comes around at the bottom as well. Yeah, I'll just go back in with the dark a little bit again. I'll borrow a little bit of that purple, make a really dark version. And that, there's a little shape there that adds on. And also a few sort of shapes that come into it that I'm seeing now. So I'm just pushing around my light and dark, my strong and weak colours, getting them to play off one another. Okay, so that's the apple in, and oh yeah, bread. Go back to these other colours here. Oh yeah, I only did the crust of the bread, didn't I? I'm actually all right with that dead layer for the actual bready part. So again, I'll put a few shadows in first. So there's some in there. Is that too dark? That's going to be a bit too dark, I think. There's that little sort of angled bit there. Oh, start to do a line. Don't do that. Okay, bit of a hard shadow underneath there. Okay, I'll come back to that. Let's go to my orange. Yeah, it's a bit more like it. But I'm realising I need a much more orange colour. To do this crust here. So there you are, that's a bit more like it. And I'm trying to paint this in a bready way now. Thinking bready thoughts. So it's sort of a bit like when I drew it, it's a bit crumbly. There are a bit more of that orange on there. I'll make a light version of that. So I was talking about these little satellites of colour. I'm going to make a light version just there. And that's going to give me a few of these little highlights and bits where that sort of crust sort of gives me these other shapes. Okay, is that do it? Oh yeah, here's a bit here. There you are. So I've got some crusty bread going on. So there'll be a few highlights and things to go in there. And what's next? I'm going to borrow a little bit of that colour with a bit of yellow. And I'm going to do this little bit in the apple there. Okay, and ooh, what else? What else does it need? You know what? I'm going to get some of that pure light colour. So I've had to use another bit of palette here, but there's a few sort of light edges to this bread. Again, thinking bready, just sort of a few splotchy marks. I'm not worrying about making it perfect.
Is there any rule to the colour of shadows?
Like I said, it's kind of a complementary colour to the colour of the light. So the shadow is really an absence of light.
Right.
If you see what I mean.
Yeah. Okay.
So what I did is, where that light isn't. So if you put a blue light on things, then you're going to have orangey shadows.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
I think so.
I would never have said that.
It's to do with how our eye sees colour. So if you, we could do all manner of experiments with it, and I won't go into too much detail. Let's get a piece of paper and I'll show you what I mean. Yeah. And you can do this as a test. If I were to get some green here, it's rather bright green, okay, and just to do a square like that, leaving a space, that white space in the middle, if you really look at it, has a kind of a pinkish quality. Now you probably need to do this on your own piece of white paper so you could see it in real life. But it looks, and you can also do it. I mean, what you can do is you can get a bright colour like that, like a strong green or a strong red, and if you just put a lump of it on a piece of white canvas, and if you stare at it, like try and, with one eye, squint your vision a bit and try and stare past it, then it starts to get this glowing halo around the edge. And that glowing halo will have a colour, and with this colour it will be pink.
Ah.
And if I were to do a red, then it would look green by comparison. So just for the sense of creating contrast, yeah, if I were to do a block that colour and really look at it, I'd see green around the edge of it.
Right.
Okay. Now if I were to do another square the same way, Oh yeah, I need to clean my brushes properly here.
This is your receptors in your eye getting tired, presumably.
Exactly, yeah. So you know when you screw in a light bulb and you forgot to turn the switch
Yeah.
off, then
Yeah.
you end up with this after image in your eye, and the after image will have
Yeah.
a funny colour, and it will usually be a bluey colour, or maybe a greeny colour. You see what I mean? Ah, anyway.
Yeah.
I'm running out of paint here. Hang on. I wonder if I can get away with thinning this, or if it was just left over on the palette, so I can't mix more. There. Let's just do that. And if I put some of that pink in the middle of this, you'll see how much more intense that colour looks by comparison.
Mm.
You know? So that's
Yeah.
that's the same principle of why we see. So in a completely even sort of flat white light, ambient light of a room, if you turn on a blue light, the shadows cast by that blue light will be filled by the ambient light of the room, which isn't blue tinted, and therefore it will look orange by comparison.
Right.
Sorry, it's difficult to explain that stuff. Anyway, where was I? Yes. So yeah, so I'm getting a bit of paint on here. There's an awful lot of the background is showing through, but it's no longer distinguishable. I'm going to get a bigger brush. I'm going to put some more of this light tea towel colour on. So I had a bit there, that was good. So let's paste some of that in. So that hard edge is important to me, as is that shape of that shadow there. I'm going to make a slightly lighter version. I had that white, I'll take a bit of this light colour, make a slightly lighter version so I can have more contrast behind there. Okay. Create an edge. Oh, this camera's quite keen on switching itself off tonight. Depends how long I've been going. But yeah, now you see this soft edge here?
Mm.
There's no hard edges there because I don't need them there. That's not important to me. Got a bit of a feedback loop going on.
So you've achieved that by having a dry brush on that stroke, have you?
Yeah, so it's and that's something. Yeah, so I am using quite a dry brush. I could add oil to this to make it spread a bit more, but I want the tea toweliness. So I was quite happy with the dry brush when I was doing the bread. So you know, I can pop a bit more of that in there, a little bit of a highlight, and along here as well. But I don't need too much of it. But yeah, just give it some breadiness. That's all there is. Yeah. With a different subject, I might want the paint to flow differently. So this is where we come to using oil, and I'll use some oil in the next stage as well. So you'll see that sort of happen. Okay, so I'm going to put a bit more light on the background behind this tankard. Okay, I'll even that edge up at the back so it's less distracting, but it's not. There you are. It's just sort of reacting to the language. I've also here, so I'll put a bit of oil in this, get it to flow a bit more at the front. And see if that works. Yeah, so where that apple is. Put a bit more light in there. So there's two ways around it. You can use thicker paint or you can make the paint flow more.
Right.
Okay, so you see I was talking about the edge of that apple earlier? So now I can put in that hard edge there and create that nice bit of contrast. And I haven't even put any of the shadow colours in yet. So before the edge of the tea towel was hanging over the edge, it's not now, so I'm not going to paint it like that. I haven't done the stripes. I don't think I'll bother doing the stripes either. Or should I go back to a number 8 brush? I've got my shadow colour here. Let's see how well that works. That's too dark. I want it to be a warmer colour as well. That's probably too warm. Okay, I'm going to take some of this tea towel colour, I'll mix it together, go halfway in between. Yeah, so that's too pink. I want to go greener. I'll borrow a little bit of this green. So I'm borrowing from other mixed colours, and hopefully all these sort of bits are talking to one another. I still want that to be lighter behind. It's got to be lighter than the tankard. That shadow is definitely lighter than the tankard. So if I put this in, there's a bit of a shadow for the handle there. Breaks up a bit at the back. A bit more shadow underneath the apple. Oh yeah, I've got this. Whoa! I've got this dark shadow underneath the bread, which actually gets even darker. So if I go to my dark that I mixed, just get a whole chunk of that, and let's put some of that under there at the bottom. That's a detail. That's a hard edge.
Mm.
There's a little bit in it there. That's where I want the eye to travel along. I can put some here underneath that edge of the apple as well. Yeah, and so with a little bit of work over the top, I can also do, what else can I do? I can get a little bit of that red from the apple, I can mix it with a little bit of that shadow colour, and I can put a few little bits in the bread. A few of those little holes and creases. I'll start with the darkest one, the darkest ones, and then when they get lighter, there'll be less paint on the brush, it can mix in with what I've got. So there you are, so there's some breadiness turning up there, which I quite like. So yeah, last things, while I've got this on the brush, I've got this creamy, sort of light bluey colour. That's going to work quite nicely for some little highlights on the tankard. So there's a little reflection there, it gets lighter. It's quite subtle. There's a little shape under there. There's a little bit across here. Where else is there? There's a bit on the handle there. Don't need to do too much to it. Yeah, where else? A bit on the edge of that. Yeah, I'm not happy with that. So let's go in with the darks again. Let's get some of that purple, let's get some of that green, let's put an extra bit of blue in it. And let's put that heavy dark in there. Just really try and get that shape. Drag it out across there. Drag it around the top a little bit. Okay. Where else? There's a bit more under here. Sort of shapes that handle a bit. Gets into there. The handle shape comes down. Okay, so the last few things I'll do, I can use that for the stalk of the apple. That was poorly done. Shouldn't have had to do that twice, but there you go. Bit of extra deep shadow, and turn these blues up a little bit. That's quite fun. Work them into the tea towel a bit, some of these little creases. Yeah, a little bit in there. No, that's too much. Last light bit. So there are some lighter greens in that tankard, and it's really funny to try and find them because every time I do, I kind of go too far with it. There we go. And the inside there, Okay, this is where I should have gone with thicker paint. Yeah, a little slab of that. Last thing, let's go back to a number 6 brush. I haven't used anything bigger than smaller than a number 6, and I'm just going to take a little bit of white. I'm going to go to this highlight colour, the actual light colour itself, and I'm going to put in a few highlights just where I need them. So there's one, there's a couple that sort of describe that. There's one on the handle there. This brush is out of shape. I could use a bit of oil here, but hey, what the hell. Okay, a few little highlights there. See if that works. It's gone a bit bluish now. A few on the tea towel, just brighten that up where it needs it. Too much detail. A little bit from behind the tankard just to harden that edge up. That's fine. A little bit in front, soften that shadow down. So yeah, now I can go back into my apple. Let's take some of that light and a little bit of that blue. Let's put
So it's interesting, some of those choices you made about your tea towel are, some are because you can see it, and some are to enhance the painting as such.
Yes.
To make something come forward, or
yeah. So I'm trying to keep this whole approach as simple and accessible as possible. But there's still things that I do when I'm painting that are going to sort of jump out, and be quite hard for me to ignore. So let's get some texture on that apple there, and a last bit of light just sat on the front there. Okay. Yeah. Well,
Have you videoed this, James?
yes, I recorded the whole thing.
Excellent. So we can
Yeah.
see how you did all your hard edges.
Yeah, but there's only a few
Right.
there, and hopefully you can spot them. There you are. So.
No, I blinked when you did them.
Well, it's more the ones that I didn't do, really. That's what's going to. There you are. So I could keep working into that, and there's plenty of opportunity to do so. I went too far with those shadow bits there. Let's just work them in a bit. Soften them down. Don't let them distract me. But yeah, there's an image now. And most of what you see is what I did last week. So if we remember this, remember we take that top layer off. You look at that top layer on its own, and it's just, you know, these few little highlights and lowlights. There's not much there, and that's what I've done over the top of this. The context was set last time, and so if I compare it to this, can you see? And that is, for me, the kind of the simplest process with the most opportunity for sort of changing things and moving things around. There's loads about that isn't quite right, that I could fiddle with. You know, I haven't got the shape of the tankard spot on or anything like that, but you know, it doesn't matter too much. I was talking about broken edges, so that shape of the tankard this side doesn't work. So what I can do is I can get some of that shadow colour, and I can just break that edge. Let's get a bit of a light colour.
Yeah.
Let's break that edge. Now you don't know where the edge of the tankard is, but you don't see it as being wrong.
that's a useful tip, isn't it? comes a multitude of
Yeah,
sins.
no, absolutely, because that is not important. This bit is important. That shape tells you everything you need to know, and if that fits in with that hard shadow there, and that links up with, you know, this sort of bit of apple here, the apple still isn't right. There's more I could do to that. So, yeah. Let's just put a bit more highlight on it. Let's put a bit more of that peachiness down one side. So turning the colour up. Yeah, I've lost it again now. There you are. Right. Again, you know, like I said, I could go over and over it, but there's no point now. But that links to that, which takes us up here, you know, and I've got this deep shadow there, that little corner that sits on its own and carries us around. So you can see how the decisions I made at the beginning have played out into how the painting is sort of developing. Now I could stop there, and there's enough information there to communicate. If I decided I wanted it to be like photographic, I could keep working on this. The beginnings of the process wouldn't be different if I wanted a different result. If I wanted to make very different marks, like last term, I've just been photographing stuff and I was just lying around the studio because I'm so disorganised, it's embarrassing. Where did that go? Yeah, there's a pile of paintings around here somewhere with the one I wanted. That's shocking. Oh, good grief. Well, hopefully it will appear. Oh, that is embarrassing. That was me thinking I was being organised and together. I've got one I did from last term where I was doing mark making and I was doing the visual mixing, and it was a very different approach. It's got to be here, and I will find it. Here it is. So yeah, so last time I did a mug and an orange, and that was the sort of the conventional finished picture, which had started like this. Obviously I've turned the mug around at some point, that's okay. So that was that first ground. That was working over the top, finding my way to the brighter colours, the stronger highlights and lowlights. But then I started this picture in exactly the same way. And that's got a very different effect because I'm doing like a patchwork of different colours that kind of mix in the eye. See? So that yellow looks a bit brighter on the screen. I'm not going to make excuses for myself. But yeah, but you can see it's the same colours, but they're just mixed visually. Rather than, obviously I've turned up the yellows and things with the highlights. So that's my best explanation of this process, what it does and how to let it deliver a painting for you. Now that's, you know, I've got my own particular style, my own particular approach. You might discover all sorts of other fun, exciting things that you want to explore, and ways you want to apply the paint or describe the scene you see or any of those things. But fundamentally it's a process where the palette and the surface and the subject matter get to talk to one another. And hopefully that will stop us ever getting lost or, you know, going off track or losing our ability to sort of keep making artistic choices and acting on them and letting a painting develop. So, yeah.